I definitely appreciate your presence here. And congratulations to you.
Well, I don't think you should. I just read the editorial in the Express, and I don't think you should.
What did the editorial say?
You must try and read it when you get some time.
No, well, tell me. I haven't read it as yet, so tell me.
No, I'm being criticized for declaring victory before the opposition came to their senses.
And you take offense to that?
No, I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed.
I mean, but you know that there will be different schools of thoughts. You're going to have people who are going to think one way, and you have somebody else who's going to think the other way. So here is somebody who is saying you should not have declared victory before the opposition, asks for recounts. But I mean, is that the normal way of doing things? I mean, you could not have anticipated a recount, could you? Or you thought that they were going to do that?
No, you could always, recounts are available to anybody who involved in an election. It is for the person or his or her agent to decide if they want to recount. But on the other hand, if I'm getting results coming from the EBC, because at a polling station, every number that comes out of a polling station comes off signed off by an electoral officer. And when I wait until I get 21 seats on EBC signed off numbers, what do you want me to do? Say we've lost the election?
So if you had to say something to that person right now who wrote that, what would you say?
I won't bother.
But the reality is that the United National Congress has asked for 5 seats to be recounted. Now, the possibility with a recount, it may go in your favor, it may not. Just per chance, if those seats recounted, they don't go in the favor of the People's National Movement. Would that victory speech in that context have been too early?
It must go in somebody's favor eventually. But I think you all are missing the point, and we should stop playing around with it. There's a very dangerous development taking place here. Well, I accept that recounts are the call of the candidate or his agent. What the UNC is doing, there are 3 things the UNC is doing here, right? 1 is to disrupt the process. These are not accidental things. This is a deliberate strategy, which is dangerous to this country. 1 is disrupt the process so as to prevent a smooth flow of the country's governance system. The swearing in would have taken place today had those recounts not been called. But this disruption has a purpose, and that purpose is to delegitimize the government's victory. And that has a purpose. That purpose is to incite a section of the population. Right? What the UNC is doing by this approach where you have a difference of 2,000 or 3,000 votes and you're calling for a recount, it is to tell the population who support them that they have been cheated, not for the first time. In 2015, the UNC did this, telling the population that follow them that they have been cheated. They went to court. They challenged 5 seats that were won even better than 2 that they had won, because the PNM had won those seats with bigger margins than Budgetary and Chaguanas East. They excluded those 2. They came to the court, and for 4 years, they attempted to get the court to overturn in that futile process. They still owe the PNM millions of dollars for that legal challenge. But what they were doing were laying the foundation. And because it has an ethnic flavor to it, it is dangerous. Because what the UNC is doing is telling the East Indian population that they have won the election, but they were cheated by the PNM. You only have to go to social media to see the effect of that.
But I mean, how does people...
A huge undercurrent of racism is now the outcome of this election. And that is the purpose of this, because the UNC leadership is fueling to the East Indian population that this is not a legitimate victory of the PNM, and that the election has in fact been stolen by PNM underhandedness. I saw a university lecturer describing the UNC defeat and ascribing it to PNM organizing the boundaries of seats so that the PNM would always win elections. But apparently that was not so when the PNM lost 33-3. It wasn't so when the PNM lost in 2000. It wasn't so whenever the PNM is defeated. But coming now from the university with a PhD and telling the population with an ethnic flavor that the PNM has so structured these seats that the victory goes to the PNM because of something the PNM has done. Now that calls into question the role and function of the constitutional arrangement of the EBC, because the PNM has absolutely nothing to do with boundaries. Boundaries in this country are determined by the EBC on a formula in the Constitution. You start counting the population in Shakashakari Island, 005, and then you count by packets of people, polling divisions you call it, going eastwards into the country. You start in Shakashakari. The first polling division in this country is in Shakashakari. Then, depending on the number of people to be in a seat, you take those packets out, then you get Diego Martin West, Diego Martin Central, and you go all the way around the country. But you have people in this country with PhDs telling the population who has lost an election that this is something that has been structured by the PNM to preserve a PNM advantage. When are we going to come alive? But this is dangerous. And if you don't believe what I'm telling you, go on social media and see what is happening there. Go and see it.
But I mean, the political leader of the United National Congress has a responsibility to the people who vote for her. And to me, it's a democratic process for her to ask for the recount. But let us look at what you could have done as Prime Minister then to probably allay some of her concerns, which is something that she raised. Observers, CARICOM or Commonwealth observers. At what point you knew you were going to call the election, and weren't you in a position to get the observers into the country before, so that they could have enough time to quarantine and to be a part of the election process?
And that is precisely what I did. Once the elections were called, once the decision was taken to call the elections were called, and I wrote to the Commonwealth Secretariat and I wrote to the CARICOM Secretariat asking them to send observers. They initially indicated, that they would see that, that they probably would try to get done. Then eventually, in the communication between us as the days passed, as they tried to do it, they came up against difficulties that caused them not to be able to meet the ground. In the case of CARICOM, when CARICOM sent out the request, because the way CARICOM does it, when a country makes that request, CARICOM then asks all the various countries who want to participate, who would like to participate. And CARICOM was able over a period of time to get an interest of only 3 people. What they were finding, people did not want to move. And also, once they got to Trinidad, they did not want to come here and go into quarantine.
But why not? This is the standard process right across the Caribbean at this time. No, people are quarantining. A lot of them opened their borders, unlike Trinidad and Tobago, so they're able to move freely.
But the bottom line is they could not find people who wanted to pick up themselves, go to another country, go into a quarantine, and then when they eventually, CARICOM was only able to raise three countries with interests, and they took the decision that they would need more than that, much more than that, to be useful. So up to the very end, in fact, we were prepared to even modify our arrangements with the quarantine, and that was going to be determined by our CMO here. So the 14-day and so on. But in the end, there was nobody. In the case of the Commonwealth, they after they looked at it, they came up against a financial situation and then they told us that the requirements were not within their remit at the point in time. I saw somebody criticizing that, saying that they have money to do these things. I don't know if you're all aware what is happening at the CARICOM Secretariat, at the Commonwealth Secretariat. All the main funders have withdrawn their funding in the context of the leadership of the agency. England, Australia, the UK, Australia, Canada, probably even New Zealand, they have all ceased funding. Don't
you think if you had gotten the observers into Trinidad and Tobago, it would have made a difference to how the United National Congress responded to the election results?
It would not have, because we had observers here in 2015 that did not prevent them from making the challenge that they made, and that they fail to get it. It's all about delegitimizing the government. Observe, as a matter of fact, based on what the UNC was doing, right, they should be the last person to be calling for observers, because their conduct were the ones the observers would have been. We are the ones who should be talking about observers. Right? You see all those fridge and stove and cash that went out during the election, we should be calling about it. But we have decided that we are going to focus on the people's business, and in fact.
But while you make the point of the fridges and stove, why didn't you make a formal complaint to the EBC if you thought that it was trying to influence votes?
We didn't spend our time trying to focus on the EBC. We focused on the population going out there and voting, putting an X by the party of your choice, and that was done. And at the end of the night, when 21 seats were declared, 21 seats, right, from polling stations, because you must know, on election night, the EBC doesn't declare results on election night. That comes like a time after, the following day or so when they get everything in place. But on election night, the numbers come to you from polling division. We get our numbers from each polling station. And when I claim that the PNM had won the election, it's because I was satisfied that 21 of those seats, right? In fact, we waited until the numbers came in every polling station, in the one that we had the narrowest margin on, before we did that. So I don't know where the story coming from. Right? And the same way, they're free to call for recounts in all 41 seats. I am free to say, knowing that we had won the election, we have won this election. What the UNC is doing is trying to tarnish this victory by a disruptive process. And that is what they have done all along. I'm simply warning this country that that disruption has a purpose. This is not accidental. This is not about any candidate feeling around, right? Because when you lose a seat by 3,000 votes and you want a recount, right? Okay, have your recount, but there's an effect to it. But we know the conversation that is taking place.
So the recount is not the issue, it's the conversation that's taking place. No, the recount is not the issue. They don't expect anything to change in the recount. But by calling for the recount and by using the recount, there's something else that they're getting done, which is to disrupt the smooth transition from the new government being sworn in. So, and that disruption of the process has a purpose, and the purpose is to forever give the impression to their followers that the government is illegal, illegitimate, because they're now, having named the charge, they're now looking for evidence of the crime. So as the leader of the country, what do you say to the people, the base of the United National Congress that's looking to them for answers, and you think that whatever the UNC is doing is disruptive? What do you say to the country to try to unite everybody, as you mentioned in your victory speech?
Just what I'm saying here now, because I'm sure the national community is watching your station, I'm saying that now, that what is happening, do not think that this is just incidental and that it is a candidate feeling that maybe I have won and the numbers were not right. That is not what is happening. What is happening is that the leadership of the UNC, once again, not for the first time, is taking the position that they will delegitimize an election which has taken place in Trinidad and Tobago. And the purpose of that is to be able to tell their supporters that we didn't lose the election was stolen from us. And populations react in a strange way, in a dangerous way, to that kind of thing. That is what is happening here. And Trinidad and Tobago is a country that has ethnic cleavages. Anybody who is trying to widen that gap is not operating in the national interest. This development, you saw what happened in Guyana, right?
Yes, I saw what happened in Guyana.
I told you all before the election that I am guaranteeing this country that come Tuesday morning, the leadership of the UNC is going to find some way, right, to cast aspersion on the outcome of this election. So say, so done. And all they're doing now is trying to find some kind of way to get this matter into the court. Because once they get it into the court, then they could play in the court, and then we get a bit of Guyanization.
Let us talk about what will happen constitutionally. If the United National Congress has decided to ask for recounts, and you're saying that the United National Congress is disrupting the process and delegitimizing the election results, what happens constitutionally if we don't have a government sworn in, if the results are stalled? What happens?
Well, that's just what happened in Guyana. The government in office remains in office until a new prime minister is sworn in. As of now, the prime minister and the cabinet remains in office. That is spelled out in the constitution. So that doesn't change. The government, there is a government in Trinidad and Tobago, but it is the government from the last swearing in. And however long this takes, the government is in office. But
So then it doesn't really affect you, really?
it does, because a new cabinet is to be sworn in, but you cannot swear in the new cabinet. You have to function with the old cabinet.
So what hindrances do you have apart from the new swearing in of the cabinet? Are there any other hindrances? Are you able to treat with the day-to-day operations of the government?
You have a manifesto in your hand, right?
Yes, I do.
That manifesto has certain commitments which require certain adjustments to the cabinet. We have made certain commitments to the country which we just got a mandate for. As a new prime minister, I need to organize the cabinet to be able to discharge that. And on the other hand, there are people who have basically gone out of office and are being told by this, you have to stay in office because you are constitutionally there until whenever a new prime minister is sworn in. So there is a disconnect that is taking place there. But the Constitution has made provision for this, if that in the event that a new prime minister cannot be sworn in, the one that's in office and the cabinet members remain in office. So, but that is not the point that I want to make. The point that I'm making, and I hope I'm being taken seriously on this matter, this is a societal problem that we are breeding here. To go and tell people that they won an election, but it was stolen from them by other people, right? You are sowing the seed for discord. And in Trinidad and Tobago, that discord is based on race. This is a dangerous cocktail. And if you don't believe me, go on social media and see what is going on there.
The government is still in place. So in terms of projects and stuff, you're saying that, is it that you can't dispense those duties, get those projects off the ground with this cabinet in place?
Well, the government is in place with all the authority of a government. But remember, it's the end of one administration, and everyone expects a new administration to come. So you are while you have the authority, there are certain things that you would not want to be doing with that authority. You want the new authority to proceed. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are not going to, in this period, this twilight period, even though the cabinet has the authority to meet and take certain decisions, there are some decisions that you would really want to wait until the new cabinet is in place, because we expect to have one or two changes in the new cabinet.
No, we're living in a time of a pandemic, and one of the issues people raised is, why did you call a general election during the pandemic? Why not wait?
Well, my answer to that is this. The same people who are asking that question, I'm sure, if I had come out and said, well, okay, there's a pandemic, so we're not going to have the general election, let's postpone it, they would have had a different conversation. Right? And the conversation would have been that Rowley wanted to hold on to power, and the PNM would have been defeated, and that's why they would want to go to the polls. As a matter of fact, the chorus from the opposition, up to the time the election was called, was call the election, call the election, call the election. The election was called, it's out of the way. So as far as I'm concerned, that is not, we did manage to conduct our election properly during the pandemic. As a matter of fact, we were probably even a little more disciplined in conducting this election, and the level of risk was not, except for one or two situations where crowds gathered either spontaneously or by organized activity. We did well in having our elections out of the way, and we're not the only country. There are a number of countries around the world, but the one thing I saw was going to raise the ire of a lot of people in this country is if I had even hinted that the election should be postponed or delayed.
No, well, I did hear those talks on the ground that the People's National Movement was going to delay the elections.
See what I mean?
Because using the numbers of the pandemic, the number of positive cases.
The reason why they would have said that is because they would have felt that we were afraid of going to the people, and therefore we wanted to hide behind the pandemic and not go to the polls. So all that would have been the conversation.
But the reality on the ground, too, is that the pandemic gave the People's National Movement a lot of clout. It gave you some goodwill. That's the general consensus in the country.
It might have crystallized certain things, but as far as we are concerned, we had been managing the country's affairs responsibly, and the pandemic was just another issue to deal with. We didn't just wake up and come out of a shell and shake it off and say, let's go and be pandemic managers. We were the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and we were taking difficult decisions and carrying the population along. Some people were resisting. I mean, let's start with the Tobago ferry. we had a ferry that was serving Tobago. The operators wanted a 5-year contract without tender, and we refused to do that. They gave notice Easter weekend that the ferry would be removed. And people in this country just ignore that and hold the government responsible for not having a ferry there. I'm sure you had forgotten that or didn't know that.
No.
The contracted person with the Galicia, because they wanted a 5-year contract without tender, that is over $200 million of tender, right? Because they wanted to buy the boat from the owner to be able to own the boat, so the boat would permanently be on the service in Trinidad and Tobago as their business. But we said, no, we're not doing that. And they told us, if you don't do it, we're going to cause trouble. We're going to take the boat out Easter weekend.
I'll tell you, Dr. Rowley, in very clear, precise terms, why I never agreed with how this government handled that issue.
Tell me.
The Superfast Galicia was in place. That contract that was awarded by the United National Congress came to an end long before the People's National Movement would have had to deal with it at that juncture in 2018. It means that between 2015, 2016 to 2018, that contract was renewed or extended over the period of time. So in my mind, if the government knew that it did not want the Superfast Galicia, to me, the way to handle the situation is to go back out to tender if you feel that Superfast Galicia and its agents, Intercontinental, wanted to go a route that was not comfortable with the government. Well, so my issue is, let's just say, hold on.
This matter is in the court.
Right.
It is sub judice.
Right. So, but you raised it, so I wanted to tell you why I don't agree.
You are going down a road of misinformation. What I just said here has nothing to do with what you are saying.
Right.
I am saying that the difficulties that we had on many things, not just COVID, there were a series of difficulties which the government had to treat with. You are telling me it is COVID that gave the government some kind of advantage in the election. I'm saying, but we have been dealing with difficult situations all along. And I mentioned the crisis of being told, this has not to do with contract.
Okay.
Of being told by a contractor who is contracted in April, the contract is going is in place until October, and the contractor says in April, listen, if you don't give me a 5-year contract without tender, we are going to pull this boat off service. This is Easter weekend in April. That's one of the first crises this government faced, not COVID.
Right.
But, okay. But you going further into
Understood. I don't want to go into
which you don't have, so I would advise you not to go there.
I don't want to go into. Let me stay away from the legalese but
good.
Let us look at what happened after the government faced that crisis, which is to bring in 2 boats that cost more than the one that was going out, even though you all raised.
I'm sorry I raised that, because you're going to want to discuss something now which is going to take up the whole morning, and you may have a position which is not correct, and I don't really think we should spend the file reply this morning. This matter is in the court. It's going to eventually make its way out into the public domain, so let's wait for that.
All right, I have no problems waiting for that. So you don't want to answer why the boats that you got after that. I'm not going into those details. Cost the taxpayers more money than what
I don't
was
want to
there.
answer. I don't want to spend this morning discussing that.
Right.
But the answer is this. When we go out for those, whatever, barge, old boat, new boat, those conditions, those terms were what the market was at the time we got there. Those are the best terms available. And you talk about contract and whatever, there were great details in that, including resulting in the dismissal of the port's management. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, I'm aware
So
of
it's a little complex, right?
All right.
It's not a straightforward matter as you would be saying.
So let us talk about the economy under the pandemic, because I personally, my personal opinion is that the government did well, very well with the health aspect. I felt safe during the pandemic. I thought that all the necessary measures were put in place for me to stay safe, for other members of the population to stay safe. But in terms of the economic side of things, I thought that it could have been better in the sense that even though I understand, the bureaucracy in getting monies out to people, that the government was trying to help those who would have been displaced by the pandemic, who would have been out of jobs by the pandemic, the businesses. But the reality is, especially in a pandemic, not unique only to Trinidad and Tobago, is that economies have suffered shocks. And economies contracted as a result of the pandemic. At this point, looking back at the last 4 months, do you think the government could have done anything differently to make the economic situation a bit better for those who live here, for the business community, for individuals?
I'm not sure I understand you, but if I think I understand you, there are always options. Government decisions are never the singular position that you could take. There are always options, and I think what the government did, especially having to do it in a short term, now for now, because the pandemic was upon us, the minute we realized that the epidemic in Asia had become a pandemic, and we have that connection to Asia. If you remember, one of the first things we had to do was to stop the traffic of people between Trinidad and Tobago and China. And secondly, traffic of people between Trinidad and Tobago and about 4 or 5 countries as the virus spread across the world. The minute we realized that it was inevitable that we would have had to respond in a serious way, because we could have been hearing it over there, or we were responding by preparing, getting certain stocks in place, making sure the staff is there and so on. But once we realized we had to take action that was physical or financial, we did that. And with respect to helping the economy, the first address by the Minister of Finance as to what the government was going to do with respect to making money available to the economy, because what we had to do to respond to the virus was to shut the country down. Once you shut the country down and money stops moving, we understood the predicament that individuals, families, and businesses would be into. So the next thing that had to be done, how do we prevent this from literally closing us off, and even permanently? So that's when the Minister of Finance came out with a package of activities in getting money to business at improved conditions, but availability, because we had to make sure that there was liquidity. Then, of course, getting money into people's pockets to be able to go to get food, to get medicine, and, of course, getting people to survive while their sustenance is not coming in. So all the things that you know, those were the options that we chose. Now, you must remember, once we took that decision, tens of thousands of people who ordinarily would not have been serviced by the state's machinery immediately required that service. So the Social Services Department did not or does not have that capacity to treat with tens of thousands of people in a week, in a day, even in a month. So we had that. So we had to use what the country had, and we went as far down. We used local government, we expanded the Social Development Ministry, we went to the churches, because we had to get sustenance to people. And I think we did a fairly good job with that, because while you will hear some people saying they did not get serviced, what you will not be hearing are the tens of thousands of people who got serviced. You know, I was in a program like this in Tobago with one of my, somebody who would not, program like this, Brother B. And the first thing he raised with me is, how come the government could have said you're helping people and nobody in Tobago has got a grant? And I was stunned, because I was monitoring this thing on a daily basis. And I was told that Tobago was being serviced, arrangement was in place for Tobago. Because I usually inquire about what's happening in Tobago. And, you know, the THA has some responsibility, central government. So that's an area where I have to kind of keep looking at what's happening to make sure the links are there. And when he told me that, I was stunned. I thought he was joking. But then he was serious. And I said, no, something is wrong. And I called up the minister on a break on my phone and said, tell me what's going on here. Not only that people had got, but almost on that day, almost 4,000 people had already been serviced out of 5,500 who had applied. But yet I was being told not a soul. So what is happening is that the people who had not been serviced are the ones who are talking. And some of those people who had not been serviced, in some instances did not qualify. And you may ask, how come people could not qualify? Well, I could tell you. The last information I had from the minister, there were about almost 4,000 people who had misbehaved in trying to get grants twice or 3 times, you know, and that is why the system has to do some kind of examination to make sure that the people who are getting these grants, getting this relief, are the people who qualify to get them. Otherwise, you just be giving away money and not necessarily going to the people for whom the money was intended. So that slows you down. But of course, it is controlled by the system we have in place. If we had the identity system in place, where once you have gone and you are identified, if you try to go again, even in a different place, you would have been identified, and that makes it faster. And that's one of the benefits that's going to happen when we create the situation in the country where we have the benefit of the technology, not to spend 3 or 4 days finding out if you are really you. And if you'd gone somewhere else before, electronically, it would make it easier and faster to deal with it.
One of the promises that the government had given when it came into office was to overhaul the public service, and I think that maybe if that was done, then even the efficiencies, the efficiency would have been different. Whatever happened with the
public service?
The public service?
The public service is a behemoth, and talking about overhauling it is easy conversation. But that's easier said than done. But when we came into office, I must tell you, we have not spent much of the time in the 60 months that we were in office. We have not spent much of that doing this overhaul. I was in the cabinet with the Gordon Draper exercise, and then I think Wade Marcus, public admin minister. And what's been happening in Trinidad and Tobago is there's a waterbed effect to the public service. You squeeze one side and you bulge the other side. Because as fast as you try to manage it here, it has an effect over there. If you, the one that comes up first and foremost is jobs. If you're overhauling the public service by making it more efficient, then you don't need the large numbers of people to fix a wire or a pole or a file. So then, if you have a reduction in the staff, because you become more efficient, then the public service as a place of employment now becomes, well, you got to get people employed, you got to create opportunities for them. So somewhere else on the government payroll, you create. So it's that kind of cause and effect. And we've had numerous instances. What we did during this term was to keep our eye on the expansion, because we did, in fact, by making some changes, for example, in the judiciary, where we've made some significant changes, it was accompanied by expansion in the public service. So while you're talking about efficiency and reduction in costs and so on, when you make these changes, they're cause and effect. The judiciary is now more modernized than virtually most other parts of the government. And to deal with that modernization, because of the increased services that's coming from judiciary, we've increased the number of judges significantly. Now each judge has to be serviced. To give the service in a particular way, you have to have people discharging certain responsibilities. So every Monday morning, in this modernization of the judiciary, you see staffing changes coming, and that's how the public service is being adjusted to suit what the government's going to do.
And Dr. Rowley, I wanted to look a little bit about the borrowing that Trinidad has engaged in over the past 5 years, especially during the pandemic, and to discuss how the government plans to repay these monies over time with such a high debt to GDP ratio.
Well, let's put it this way. The borrowing was absolutely essential. We didn't borrow because money was there to be borrowed. We started our borrowing to support the budgetary arrangements because there was not enough money available to service the country and keep it at a level to try to initiate some growth. So we borrowed in 2016, 2017. You may recall in 2016, we were so short of money that the fiscal gap was very, very large. Right? But we borrowed to be able to stabilize the economy. Had we not done that and had confined ourselves to only what we earned, the economy would have collapsed, because the economy was at a level of spending $63 billion. That's where that budget was, because we came in September, right? When the budget was already prepared. And we went to the parliament, we made minor adjustments and passed that budget. But immediately after, we had to cut public expense by 7% because the money just wasn't there for that budget. And we moved with that budget into 2016. By that time, it was borrowing that we had to use to support the economy, otherwise it would have collapsed, because the revenue at that time, there was a revenue gap of billions of dollars. So if we were forced to only operate the country on the basis of that revenue, we would have had to lay off huge amounts of public servants, reduce a lot of government activity, and once you reduce activity in one area, you literally as a knock-on effect, and that would have been economic collapse. So even though we are concerned about the level of borrowing, we had to borrow to prevent a worse situation, which was to prevent a collapse of the economy.
How does the government get out of that position where you have all these monies to repay, you don't have enough revenues? How do you get out of this?
You get out of it by strengthening your revenue situation. You strengthen your revenue situation.
And what do you plan to do that?
Well, look at where can we earn? Where is our earning? Where's the earning of Trinidad and Tobago coming from? The earning in the immediate and medium term in Trinidad and Tobago is largely from the energy sector. We use the energy sector, one, to get additional revenues to fill the gap that you just mentioned, and going forward, we have made certain changes, significant changes, which will put us in a position to get additional revenues. And in the meantime, we look outside of the energy sector, and a lot of people were pleasantly surprised to see that the non-energy sector had played an improved role during that period of 2016, 2017, when the energy revenues had virtually almost dried up. So we do have a sector outside the energy sector which we're trying to grow, and we just have to keep ensuring that our revenue, our effort to get improved revenues, wherever those revenues could be had, wherever, because we have a huge gap between where we are. And if the objective is first and foremost to maintain those gains where we're at and then to grow them, then we have to keep our eyes on the revenue side.
So the people of Trinidad and Tobago cannot expect any real improvements over the next 5 years. Things are difficult for the average citizen.
Of course they can, because I mean, whatever we are doing with or without large revenues, whatever we're doing, those things that we are doing are in fact contributing to people's well-being. I mean, a simple thing like maintaining people in jobs, that's the first thing. Because if you don't have a job, then your quality of life immediately is impacted and could deteriorate. So we have to keep our eyes on job creation. The government is the largest employer in the country, for good, bad, or indifferent. That's a fact. So we have to make sure that we don't use job losses off the government payroll as the solution, as some people have been forced to do. And if you're borrowing, get to the point where you're really in real trouble, where you can't borrow and you can't repay, then you have no choice but to go to the lender of last resort, which is the IMF. And once you go to the IMF, the first thing the IMF will tell you, hey, you're carrying too many people on your payroll.
Yeah,
right?
But while the government says that it has not cut the public service, the reality is that a lot of people, their contracts have not been renewed. Isn't it the same effect with that they've lost their jobs under this government?
The government still has maintained a lot of contract workers. Some contract workers have lost their jobs, and some of them have got jobs elsewhere, because not all of them have gone home and sat down. But job changes will take place in an active economy. But in terms of gazetted public servants, that's what I'm talking about. The people who are the permanent public service with an appointment in the public service, not a contract officer who came in on a 1-year contract or a 3-year contract. And a fair amount of people that come in on contracts. And some of those contracts would have been not renewed. But bear in mind, the government's ability to pay those contracts came into serious question, and we maintained a very high level of job maintenance and job creation. The billions that we borrowed and spent on a development program, to carry that development program, it required people, right? For example, when we spent money on repairing those legacy buildings, the President House, the Parliament, and so on, you know how many thousands of jobs over that period were created there?
But they're short-term jobs.
But most jobs of that nature are going to be short-term jobs. We don't have 10 president houses to fix. After you finish doing one, then you go on to another one, which is why the budget is an annual thing. What you do this year, the next year you'll have other opportunities. Like right now, the government is still building roads, we're fixing schools, we're building community centers. But so all those activities create a certain population of jobs. And then there are other jobs that you are in it as a public service job where you're gazetted. So once the economy is active, opportunities are created, and that's what we have to keep doing.
One of the things that people on the ground asked me to ask you is about
Who are these people on the ground asking you to ask me that?
People on social media will send you, once they know you're in the media, people on social media will send you questions all the time. Some of the questions I got to ask you is about the refinery.
Social media?
Facebook, Instagram,
why is it called
Twitter,
social media?
Because you socialize.
Oh.
You socialize there, you make connections with people that you probably wouldn't easily make connection with otherwise. Yeah, so that's why they call it social media.
Well, a lot of it is quite antisocial.
You find?
A lot of it, well, I just see some of the products, right?
Right.
And a lot of it is, is quite antisocial.
I mean, a lot of what you're going to find, you're going to have mean people, you're going to have kind people. That's just what it is. But one of the questions that I got on social media for you is that people are concerned about the fact that in 2020 they don't have adequate water supply, especially during a pandemic where people are being asked to wash their hands regularly. So I want to know what if the government has any concrete plan to treat with the water crisis in Trinidad and Tobago.
It's amazing how these things appear as though they come out of spite and vindictiveness or even incompetence. Are you aware that we are in a drought? And that the reservoirs, there's a picture of our largest reservoir, grass growing in it. And the WASA will tell you, because WASA put out these bits of information, that the inadequacy in the water supply, it starts with not enough water. If we had tried to maintain the same level of water production, meaning between the reservoir and what goes into the distribution system, if we had tried to maintain that at the high level that we would have done in a non-drought environment, we would have run out of water because there wasn't enough water to keep us going all the way down to July, August at that level because we are in a drought. Interestingly enough, and strangely enough, even when it rained in the last few months, whenever it rained, the rain was falling on the western part of Trinidad. The rain was not falling east of the reservoir, so no water was going to the reservoir. I'm hoping, I was checking the day before yesterday, the rains we got there. I was hoping that some of that would have taken place. We got some rain in some fairly heavy rains the day before the election, and hopefully that would have added some water. I don't know how much yet to the Arena Dam. But if you had seen the pictures of that dam, the water levels are at a record low. So we were basically rationing water. Now, and that is not to excuse any inefficiencies in WASA and the leaks and the waste and so on. But in terms of having enough water to maintain the level of production, we have been in a drought in this country. So that was reflected in this rotation of the system, which might not have been efficiently handled. I have had to ask the Minister of Public Utilities to literally go to WASA to make sure, right, that the efficiency level of that rationing is tolerable, because there were some people who would not get water for a week, and then the complaints come 2 weeks.
Does the water park gets water from WASA?
The who? The
water park, Five Islands Water Park in Chaguaramas.
I'm not sure where the water supply comes from, but it wouldn't be for them dam up here. If it's in Chaguaramas, I don't know where the water is coming from, and if it's fresh water, and it's on the national system, it's probably going to come from the Chaguaramas aquifer down there, because the western part, like West Moorings, from 4 roads going west, we get our water from Chaguaramas, right? The dam water from Carolina that comes this way doesn't come down into the Diego Martin Valley down there. So Diego Martin, we have a well field. There are wells in that valley. And one of the problems that's happening now is that those areas are so heavily developed that the local water supply is stretched. There are too many people in there depending on the local water supply. So, but I don't know where their water.
So again, what does the government plan to do to address this crisis? Well, it literally is a crisis. If you recognize on the one hand there is drought, but on the other hand, during the rainy season, does the government has enough catchment areas? How does it plan to deal with the inefficiencies in WASA? What does it plan to do about the leaks?
Well, WASA has an ongoing leak repair program, but that seems to be ongoing forever. That was going on since I was there in 1987 or 80, no, earlier than that. But WASA has an ongoing leak repair program that deals with some of the leaks, and they do fix a lot of leaks, but that is not we have pipe replacements as well. And in terms of having enough water, we had just initiated at the Public Utilities Ministry an approach to the IDB to have us look at an improvement in our water production. Right? We need there's a view that we need to produce more water, but then when you produce it, you can't use it to irrigate the country through leaks. Right? And we wanted to see where there is either surface water or groundwater that is available. So we're going to maximize the use of surface water. But what that does, it exposes you to the vagaries of the weather. So and then we do have, we ended up, what has happened here, we ended up in a situation where we are now overly reliant on desalinated water. Once we got into the business of using desalinated water, we got into the business of using WASA's revenue to pay for it. So that desal plant now uses up WASA's revenue in such a way to pay for that desalinated water that WASA does not now have revenues to deal with the other side of the system, and is now relying on the Minister of Finance to fund the WASA, because so much of our revenues are going to every gallon of water we get from the desal plant. It's a decision that we took that changed the equation, because if you were using natural water supply, when you spend the money on that, it's sunk cost, but you got the structure, and the cost per gallon, the cost per cubic meter of that water is far lower than the cost at the desal. And we surreptitiously, creepingly, got ourselves now to a point where we are heavily dependent on desalinated water. And worse, that water has to be paid for in US dollars. So WASA carries a debt to the desal plant in US dollars. WASA doesn't earn US dollars. The Minister of Finance has to find US dollars to give WASA to pay for that water. A Minister of Finance that is in the situation that you're familiar with.
Yeah, but it sounds to me that there's a lot that the government has to fix, because at the end of the day, while the people are aware of the issues and may accept it to some level, the people are also looking at the government to fix the issues, not only to just outline what's wrong, but to tell them how they're going to get the wrong right.
That's what the government is doing. As I just told you, we have to find ways of having more water produced. And that exercise was one that caused a bit of a problem recently that you would have might have been affair with. You would have probably heard about it, that the government was moving towards that, but then there's a difference of opinion in some quarters. The argument is that we have enough water, but we're not using it properly. That's the other option. When you look at the per capita, the number of cubic meters for the population, but that's only an indicator, right? And those indicators sometimes may not be close to reality. But we have a supply of water which clearly either needs to be used better or to be increased.
And the other side of that is flooding. So when we get the rains, we get the floods. And just even about a week ago, we saw flooding in La Horquetta, which resulted in the distribution of the fridges and the stoves and all of those things, because people got flooded out and their furniture got damaged. I don't know at this point what to ask the government again, or what the government will do to treat with the flooding. While you can't prevent the water from coming, the thing is, how do people
I'll tell you what we've done.
Stay safe?
I'll tell you what we've done. In that same area mentioned, in La Horquetta, where we had this heavy Green Bay flood, we went into the Caroni River, we widened it, and we raised the banks. So there was no flooding in Greenville. Right?
So is this something you'll have to do right across the country for Bangu, for Siparia, for all the areas? I mean, it seems as if right across Trinidad and Tobago you get
because we have people living in what are natural water courses. Some of them are paved, some of them are not, some of them are narrowed. But in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a significant part of the population who live in natural water courses. Or areas that would be claimed by the river when the 10-year flood or the 20-year flood comes. There are certain kinds of water you'll get every 20 years, every 15 years. And because of that, you will get, if you are not able to control it when it comes, and sometimes it comes in such a way, when the rivers in the Arapuch area are outflowing, at high tide they can't flow out because the sea is lifted. You know, there are days you'll pass on the creek and you can literally put your hand in the water and the other days the water is way down there because the sea rises. So at high tide, those rivers cannot flow out. So if there's rain, if rain falls, and those rivers are pouring water in, but the water can't go out, it's only one thing that happens then. It rises and it spreads out. And then when the tide drops, then the rivers flow out and the water drains off. You could do all kinds of things in there to improve the drainage in El Socorro. What we did there, that the minister reported to me a couple of days ago, when that rain was taking place and the flooding was threatened. By 4 o'clock in the morning, it was the first time in years that all our pumps were working. And there was no flooding in El Socorro because this government spent significant monies. We found, bought, and installed new pumps. So as water was going to be rising in those areas, the pumps were at full blast, pumping the water out. Nobody noticed that in El Socorro, that the reason why it didn't flood, right? Because the river was at peak, right? But thank God, the pumps were in place, the pumps were operating, and there was no flooding. But good news doesn't sell in this business.
Crime. It's the issue that everybody talks about. You know, somehow people can't seem to, I don't want to say get it right, but the reality is that the statistics are against the country. If you look at the population size and the amount of murders we have, because that's what people look at. Not that there aren't other categories of crime, but people look at murders. What has the government done in the 5 years to treat with the issue of crime?
Well, the main thing what we did was to ensure that the aspect of the state's management that has the responsibility for responding to crime are functioning to the best of our ability. There are two areas. One is to ensure that there's a strong social support system for people who need help to get along with the basics in life. We maintain a very strong social support system in Trinidad and Tobago, to the point where it is viewed as an entitlement, an unfunded entitlement on the part of some people. Secondly, the police service, one of the first things we did as government was to attack the regulations that were standing in the way of the appointment of a commissioner of police. What we found when we came into office was that there was no government department that was taking the responsibility for initiating the process of the appointment of a commissioner of police. And we felt that that was unacceptable, and for the police service to function at optimum, it required to put somebody properly in charge. We amended the regulations, triggered the process, got a challenge in court. We had to wait for that to be done in court. We came out of the court, and we proceeded to trigger the process. Went into a search process, and the search process ended with the appointment of a commissioner of police. That commissioner of police has taken charge, and a number of the things that came out of our examination of the police service, because you must remember, we also did a detailed examination of the police service under the Professor Diosaran committee. That committee made a series of recommendations, not all of which have been acted upon, but it became a guidebook for the commissioner as appointed. And you would have seen a police service in Trinidad and Tobago that was more up to the task of responding to the criminal element than it was before. And we continue to work on that. The recent numbers, granted we are in a pandemic, but the recent numbers have shown a reduction in serious crimes in the country, and also an improvement in detection. Those are the two areas that we're working on, and it's a constant job. I would say that the police service in Trinidad and Tobago today is in a much better position as a police service than it was before. And of course, the police service reports to the government on certain matters of its preparation and its ability to respond. And it remains an independent police service under a commissioner of police, and we have been providing them with the resources that the country is able to provide, and we keep going from strength to strength. But you ask, why is it happening like this? A simple answer is that crime pays some people in this country. And as long as crime pays, especially if it pays with impunity, you're going to have more and more people trying to get involved in it because it pays. The criminal element in Trinidad and Tobago is no longer two people arguing in a bar, get into a fisty fight, and one kills the other one with a knife. firearms have given a certain amount of impetus to making crime pay. That is an offshoot of the drug trade that came to our country. It is still here, and it has grown, it has expanded now to a significant number. The crime that we're facing now is international prostitution, because prostitution pays. People traffic people, bring young girls into the country, then they have to protect their business, they're competing, and none of them could go to the police station and make a complaint about their business. So they have the law enforcement among the criminal trade is your gun and my gun, your people and my people, your turf and my turf. And that is how the crime has escalated. So we have to eliminate the traffic, we have to eliminate the flow of guns, we have to dissuade youngsters from getting into gangs all the way to the schools. And of course, the mothers who are raising children need to get the social support system to try and help them raise their children properly.
When you were opposition leader, you were quoted as saying that if a government is in power and cannot deal with crime, then it should demit office. You were in government for 5 years, and the statistics would show that murders went one way, up.
That is not entirely correct, because you could be looking at murders going down today, and then tonight 5 people get killed, right? I couldn't know you were going to kill somebody. It's an ongoing curve. And if you look at the government's response, you look at this government's response, and the one thing this government cannot be accused of is not dealing with crime. You may not have got the results that you want, but you can't say we haven't dealt with it. You talk to the commission, bring the commissioner of police here, right? And let him sit down here and tell you how he, as part of the state's machinery, he and the 8,000 or 9,000 people under him, how they have been dealing with crime. The statistics on their own as a bare face doesn't tell the whole story, right?
So maybe the issue isn't the police service then, and maybe the issue is unemployment, maybe the issue is the youth, maybe it's a lack of opportunities. So then let us talk.
That's why I've said the government has done it. The two main areas are in effective policing, because when people have armed themselves to go and conduct their business, there's only one agency of the government that can take that on as their day's work, and that is the police service. The Ministry of National Security, right? Because the police service is a part of the Ministry of National Security. We have dealt with a number of things. We have dealt with changes in the legislation. We have given the police ammunition in legislation to deal with certain things. So this is how you respond to a chronic crime problem. And it is taking longer than we expect to turn around and come back to a place of comfort. But the effort, what cannot be said is that the effort is not being made towards a result that we expect will put us into a position of greater safety and security.
Let us talk about the effort of the governments regarding the borders. The borders seem to be porous. Almost every day we see those boatloads of Venezuelans trying to come to Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of them making it to Trinidad and Tobago and are either deported, repatriated to their country. The government in 2015 complained very vociferously about the OPVs that were cancelled by the United National Congress. So let us talk about what the government has put in place to man the borders between 2015 to now to ensure border security.
Well, one of the things we've done, we've maintained high levels of patrol. What Trinidad and Tobago is a circular border. I mean, whether it's the Tobago base, the Trinidad base, the ports, we have, and close to us, right, we have a large neighbor with a lot of people who are on the move. So the border remains a challenge because people are always trying to penetrate it. A lot of what you've seen is as a result of these increased patrols, because it is the increased patrols that allow us to meet these people, stop them or pick them up at sea, or patrols on land. The Defense Force is actively engaged in patrolling our on-land situation in the south. And every so often you'll see them picking up people because the work is being done. It's not as if I've heard people say we've left the southern border open. People are coming through into this country in Tobago, in Chagaramas. From Chagaramas to Guira is a straight run at night. So the Defense Force, the Coast Guard is out there at nights patrolling, and very frequently they intercept people. Some get through, right? And in borders around the world, I mean, it's all
the youth. When you were having your victory speech Monday night, you spoke about getting them engaged, because one of the perennial cry during the campaign season is that the youth weren't going out to vote. At this point, we don't know what the voter turnout is. But the youth complained that they didn't feel engaged. They felt disconnected from what was happening in governance. So what do you plan to do to address that disconnection between the youth and government?
Well, there will be a series of programs aimed at youth participation. And that participation is to create opportunity. So you will see some initiatives that specifically target that youth participation. You would have heard me saying that we're going back to the establishment of youth camps with some element of voluntary national service, where young people who are not currently engaged in productive activity could be channeled into. And we intend to spend some of our resources on productive agricultural production, which has the potential, especially in the rural areas, to bring some of our young people into productive activity, even if it has to be state-supported, so as to have that production sustained to the point where it can become effective. You will have heard me talking about a target for cocoa production. If we leave it to laissez-faire, it's not happening. But we're going to be a little more proactive in putting some structures in place. We are identifying land now, where those lands are going to be the acreage. We are going to go to the communities and identify the people who genuinely want to be involved, package them, and in fact, as you're going to see a kind of homesteading program in some areas in the east and in the south. And so at the end of the program, there should be something to show that the program has produced something which is sustainable.
And everything costs money. And every budget, we see agriculture getting the smallest piece of the pie. So if you have these programs for the youth and it involves agriculture, are we going to see an increase in the budgetary allocation for agriculture?
Yes, you will. You would have seen we have a level of activity now which is funded at a certain level. But you will see a significant, that 500 million that the roadmap committee mentioned is additional. And it is in that 500 million that we will have some of these programs or some of these infrastructure type things that will create more opportunities. This period going forward, if I have one word that I would use to cover it, is our attempt to create more opportunity. You see, one has to be careful in a country like this with limited resources that opportunity is only confined to the privileged few who grow in size, whereas the majority may not have opportunity to begin to grow. So we have to try to create opportunities.
So you're going to try to bridge a gap between the rich and the poor?
Well, that is so cliched. I'm not really trying to interfere with the bridge between the rich and the poor, because there's nothing wrong with the rich getting richer, but the poor must come out of poverty. Right? So
well, that's kind of bridging the gap, you know?
That is the equation. It's not a seesaw where one has to go down for the other one to come up. You have to find a way that you encourage the rich to get richer, because in getting richer, they create opportunities for the poor. Opportunity. And of course, if one wants to take advantage of opportunities that are made available, one has to prepare oneself, right? To make the sacrifice, to make the effort, because out of effort will come reward. So it's not a simple up and down situation. It is that you have a target of ensuring that no one is left behind and that there's opportunity for everyone to move up.
One of the things we always hear is, yes, we're going to increase employment, we're going to increase employment. The United National Congress promised us 50,000 jobs. Now, while you didn't give us a figure, what we don't know, apart from what you just mentioned with agriculture, is how do you plan to increase that employment, especially amongst the youth?
Well, we have plans to improve youth training. We have plans to reposition the people that we've trained. For example, we have a few thousand people now, many of them well trained. When we go digital in Trinidad and Tobago, some of those people who are now OJT will become the people that you tap to get into permanent arrangements to preserve and sustain that digital economy that we're talking about. Many of them are already prepared. The OJTs are holding bay for them now. And then you tap into that, and then you create more opportunities. Because let's face it, nobody except the state welfare program, nobody going to hire you because you want a job. They hire you because they have something to be done, and they need you to do it for them, and they will pay you to do that. So once we have activities that are required to be done, funded by the private sector or by the state, those activities will call on the labor pool to come in there. One of the things that you will see very soon in the new government, whenever we sworn in, is that we are going to be allowing the private sector to see new opportunities. Let's take the city of Port of Spain. The cabinet, the outgoing cabinet, has already approved some changes that we had some professional people look at the city of Port of Spain and review how Town and Country Department smothers capital investment in accommodation and business in the city of Port of Spain. The value of land has gone to a point where if you restrict the owners of those lands from maximizing the use of it by Town and Country restrictions, arbitrary restrictions in some instances, then you are smothering the opportunity. If I have a plot of land in Port of Spain and they tell me I can only go up 1 floor or even 2 floors, and I look at the cost of doing that and I'm only going to get X units, then I don't do it. If on the other hand, you, after proper study, without damaging the environment, meaning all in its widest sense, you can say, okay, we can, in 2021, 2020, we can look at four-story accommodation units in the city. That immediately makes that footprint, right,
well, the
more
government
useful.
did promise us those housing in East Port of Spain, though. And then we had the issue with the contract with the Chinese firm. So what's going to happen with that?
Well, you see, one has to, the government, there's a limit to what government can do. The government cannot undertake to fund everything. We're talking about something more fundamental, where the private sector will see opportunity and then use their resources or their ability to borrow to create an item that would be profitable to them. And then they go on. Because even if the government wants to do certain things, and then the government doesn't have the funding to do it, it remains a pipe dream. But on the other hand, there's the private sector that owns some of the land, has the ability to borrow money, but when they do so, they will only do that if what they do will create something which will continue to make them prosper. And we are going to create that environment in the city of Port of Spain and elsewhere to draw that private sector involvement, to allow more money other than government money to get involved in development.
Let us talk about East Port of Spain, because probably about 2 months ago, we saw what I would call an uprising in East Port of Spain, the youth coming out angry, protesting violently against the state. And you set up a committee to look into what's happening in East Port of Spain. Can you give us any update on that committee with Anthony Watkins, and if any work has been done since?
I'm understanding that they have been working, but I am yet to receive their findings, their preliminary findings. But we are working. We are still on track, because what they were told is that they will. There's a budget coming up, and we are into that budget now. Once we get these intervening matters out of the way, this month of September, coming up here, is the month when the budget would be in the Parliament, and by that time we should have received the input, would have digested it and put some resources in there specifically to deal with some of the recommendations that will come from that committee.
Because one of the complaints you hear all the time is that the People's National Movement does not look out for its base. It does not support the people who are in its safe seats.
If that was really so, then the PNM would not have had any safe seats. The PNM is a national party. We support the national programs, the national requirements, and the areas that you talk about, safe seats. Why do you think they're viewed as safe seats? It's because those people have been finding good reason to support the PNM.
What do you think happened in Diego Martin in 2010 with the elections? All 3 seats came very close. The votes were maybe between 1,000 to 700 in terms of how you all won the Diego Martin seats.
And what happened after?
In 2010.
And what happened in 2015?
Well, in 2015, what happened? You won comfortably.
You know, it depends on what are the issues of the day. This is not a stone that is, you know, issues come and issues go. The PNM was in office for unbroken years, and then come 1986, the issues of the day caused the population to not see the PNM as its best choice going forward. And rather than raise that as some failing on the part of the PNM, let me explain to you, there are only 3 places in this country where the PNM has never lost an election, meaning that people judge the PNM and choose the PNM of their own free will. And when they don't feel happy enough with the PNM, they choose somebody else. And they quickly come back to the PNM because all those who hold out the land of milk and honey, when they put to the test, the population find that they're just not up to it. The only 3 places in this country where the PNM has never lost a general election: Buku in Tobago, Laventil, and San Fernando East. Right? In every other area, from time to time, the people will decide, look, the PNM might not be our best option, and they try other options, as is their right, as is the process. But then they come back to the PNM. You mentioned Diego Martin in 2010, when some yellow fell on Diego Martin on the map and people are dancing in the street. By the following election, 2015, those same people had taken the decision that the PNM is their best option. And we've been in opposition, what, 3 times, 4 times? So we're not any monolith. As sometimes when you see the commentators talking about the PNM, it's as though the PNM grabbed this country by its throat and is choking it, and they must get. The PNM has been in and out of government, right? Evaluated on our policies and programs and found to be the best option for this country more than anybody else. And that's what happened last Monday. Because if you listen to some people, the election date only had to be called for the PNM to be dismissed out of sight. Right? As a matter of fact, I was reading a commentary by a very sad commentator last night saying that how this government was the most unpopular government and how the government could have got back into office. And I just smiled and said the answer is simple. The people voted us back into office. That's how we got back into office. Because what you were feeding them was not the entire story. And they know it.
Dr. Rowley, let us look a little bit at legislation. The government brought a slew of legislation that the population supported mostly. There were some exceptions, which is what the changes that the government wanted to make to the Freedom of Information Act. I think even the Interception of Communication Act received some pushback from the people on the ground. But the government promised us the Public Procurement Act. It promised us autonomy for Tobago. And it also promised us campaign finance reform.
And we've taken action on all of those things. Let's take the last one first. Campaign finance reform. We worked assiduously and got to the stage where a bill has been laid in the Parliament. There's a bill in the Parliament now on campaign finance reform. This government did the work to create that bill. As a matter of fact, I started working on that when I was in opposition. Right? I was the only person from Trinidad and Tobago in politics who had been to Jamaica in the OAS conference. The PNM is the only political party that took part in the Barbados meeting, and Trinidad and Tobago government refused to host a meeting here in Trinidad on campaign finance reform. When I came into office, one of the instructions to the Attorney General was to proceed to act on that. He did so. His staff worked on it. By the time in our 5th year, we were able to lay in the Parliament legislation. There is legislation there before a committee of the Parliament. Because it's not the kind of thing that you could just go in the Parliament and say, let me pass this. It is before a select committee of the Parliament. So that is there. Miles ahead of where it was. Some of the very commentators who were in Parliament before, who did nothing about it, you'll hear them commenting now that there has not been campaign finance reform. This government is reforming campaign finance. It's not complete. And in the Parliament, we're going to pass it, and eventually we're going to get new, updated rules in Trinidad and Tobago done by this government. I could tell that now for sure, because we have another 5-year term in our hands. Tobago, in terms of government, Tobago. Yeah. That's a process that is well underway, and it again is in the parliament. This government received the work that was done in Tobago. There was a 2-year period under the PNM, THA, Orville, London. 2 years they had consultations in Tobago. Those consultations generated draft bills written by lawyers, codifying what people were saying they want done and how it appears in law. That has been done by eminent lawyers. So we're making progress. Those bills came to the cabinet. The cabinet then looked at it. The cabinet put the whole package in the parliament because only the parliament could make the changes that are anticipated there. The Parliament Committee has had a series of meetings working with the IDB, working with experts to determine what Tobago wants, because these wants and needs have legislative consequences, and they have to be worked out. You can't just go and say, let me pass this and get them that, because there are consequences to each change. I spoke a while ago about the waterbed effect. If you sit on a waterbed, it sinks here, but it bulges over there. So you say you want this. Okay, how is that going to be done? What will be the effect of that? So we have our parliament in Trinidad and Tobago, that parliamentary committee has had a number of meetings with the people who are working with them. And we are going to come to a point where that committee is going to report to the parliament, this is what we have come with.
Why did it take until 2018, though, for the government to bring this particular piece of bill before the parliament?
I just explained to you, it's a process. We waited here.
You're saying between 2015 and 2018 you were working on it, the government was working on it?
We received it from Tobago at a certain point in time. Then it was in the cabinet. It didn't stay long with the cabinet. We brought it to the parliament. At the parliament, it went to select committee. This was never languishing anywhere. It's a long journey. It's a process. Like right now, I don't know when that committee is going to report to the parliament. We do have, there's a government there, there's the opposition, there's the independent senators. They are working on it. I see the fact that they're working on it. But you hear people saying, you hear the nonsensical statement from some people that this government should have passed it. That is somebody who's either been malicious or just being generally uninformed of what the process is. These are not the kinds of things that you can just go to the parliament and say, okay, I'm in the parliament, get up and talk for 45 minutes and pass it into law. They have far-reaching consequences. And therefore, the parliament as a deliberative body is working on it. And look at where it's at. Under this administration, after years of talk in Tobago, this Prime Minister in this administration has put the matter in the parliament where it belongs, because only parliamentarians could make the changes Tobago is asking for. And it's there now. So let's be patient. There's no need to upset yourself with that. If somebody wants an election campaign and they start saying, I will do it, I will do it. Do it how? What other process exists? There is no other process that exists to treat with the issues of Tobago self-government than to get it to the parliament. What we have got to the parliament is the proceeds of the deliberations in Tobago, which Orville London, as Chief Secretary, did in Tobago. It took 2 years of deliberations in Tobago to get the lawyers to now sit down and write what these people have said and put it in a legal form, legal drafting, in the form of 2 bills, which the authorities now will consider whether they can be passed into law in their form or in an amended form.
Wanted to speak with the Prime Minister again, for the first time this morning about Petrotrin Refinery. Right before the general elections, we were told that they are just waiting on the OWTU and Petrotrin Energies and Patriotic Energies to sign. Well, the signing didn't happen, and Mr. Roji has said that the Prime Minister is playing politics to get votes. Mr. Prime Minister, how do you respond to that charge from Mr. Roji, that you don't seem to be, the government doesn't seem to be interested in getting the deal signed, and that every time the goalpost is moved?
All I will say to that is that and I don't want to engage Mr. Roger on this matter because that wouldn't be helpful. I simply want the population to know that there is a responsible government in Trinidad and Tobago. And this matter, this is $1 billion business that is best dealt with in a serious way by people who know that this is business. And when you sign a contract in this situation, there are serious consequences. So therefore, you ensure that the contractual terms are properly negotiated And unless you come to a position where the terms of the contract, the terms are acceptable to both parties, the negotiation continues. And I trust that the union will understand that, and that this is, what they're doing is stepping out from the mode or the modus operandi of conducting union business, where you shout at people, make accusations, conspiracy theories, march and placard. Get away from that and look at the business that you're involved in, because that requires a certain decorum, a certain amount of behind-the-scenes confidentiality to negotiate and come to a position before you sign a contract. You don't sign a contract because somebody wants a contract signed by a particular date. That is a recipe for a disaster. And all I will tell the population is that we will not sign a contract if the public interest is not served. And for the public interest to be served, the terms of that contract has to be negotiated, and we come to a point where signing is now the sensible thing to do. We were aiming to have that signing done at a little earlier time. The negotiations were not completed in time. And let me repeat that. The negotiations were not completed in time. Some people even take the position that consequential clauses in a contract to protect interests are moving the goalposts. That is their view. But the bottom line is, before anybody acting on behalf of the public signs that contract, the public interest will have to be served, and the government has to be satisfied that the negotiation is completed. As I speak to you now, I do not have any information that the negotiations have been completed. The last time I had information, in the last couple of weeks or so, it tells me that the negotiations have not been successfully completed, and that is where I am. Others could go in the street and shout and make accusations. I'm accustomed to accusations being made. And in terms of getting votes, we've got all the votes that we could get in the election, with or without certain kinds of support. We went to the polls, we went to the people. The people have spoken about getting votes. This is not about getting votes. This, starting from day one, is protecting the public interest. The restructuring of Petro-Trin was not about getting votes. As a matter of fact, many of them thought it was losing votes, right? We took the decision in the public interest, and we stand by that. Then, we stand by that now. So the accusations and the conspiracy theories and the placards don't faze me. We are going to do it in the public interest and do it properly. This is corporate business. And I am hoping that the union could transition, since they've indicated a willingness to get involved in this billion-dollar business, that they would make that transition from the rah-rah to sensible negotiations where both parties are to be served, because that refinery, if it is restarted, it would be in the national interest, it would be in the hands of the private sector, and once it is operating, we're all better off if it's operating properly. If it never reopens, well then, that's a bad thing for everybody. But we, the government, we have bent over backwards to facilitate its reopening in that way. And you would have seen us, the union made an offer which had serious upfront cash requirements. We went over, we said, well, okay, knowing what is required to get it going, we will give you a moratorium on that. But instead of acknowledging that the government wants it done, you're hearing this about, making accusations against me personally. We don't personalize these things. We don't personalize these things. This is public interest, billion-dollar investment. And to tell me sign it because you want it for a certain date, that doesn't make any sense.
Dr. Rowley, the government took the decision to close Petro-Trin refinery, saying that it was losing it had lost $2 billion. I don't know if it's for a year or if it was over a period of time.
It had lost $20-odd billion. The last loss was $6 billion write-off, and the projection going forward was to lose $2 billion a year going forward.
All right. The government is not losing that money anymore. But if Patriotic Energies Company Limited gets hold of the refinery and the contract is finalized, the government is now taking its oil outside to be refined. Will the government give that contract to Patriotic Energies Limited to refine its oil?
I couldn't answer that question in that way. I mean, Heritage has oil to sell, and Heritage would sell oil to a buyer, the best buyer. if Heritage is getting, the refinery in Trinidad and Tobago can get its oil, some of it from Trinidad and Tobago, and some of it from outside. What happens is that once Heritage has oil to sell, it will sell that oil in contractual arrangements, which will give Heritage its best earnings. The problem with our oil business, which caused the restructuring of Petrotrin, is that we had a refinery which did not have enough oil to refine. So it relied on imported oil. That business of refining imported oil was a money-losing business for Petrotrin. Patriotic is now a business model where they have a partner. It's not just OWTU. The biggest part of that arrangement is a partner that has come in with OWTU to create Patriotic. They, by their international business, could be the supplier of oil that Petrotrin didn't have. And that model is what we hope will be successful, where there'll be a supply of oil, not taxpayer oil, and that they will operate the refinery efficiently and make a profit doing so. And Trinidad and Tobago would be in the refining business in a different model. Not that we have shut down Petrotrin. Petrotrin has withdrawn from the oil refining business based on imported oil. Is selling oil through Heritage, selling oil to those who buy oil as against refining the oil and selling refined products. Because the real loss that the taxpayer was taking, I don't know if you saw my presentation during the election campaign, where I showed you that the selling of refined products was profitable. Finding oil and selling oil was profitable. Where the money was being lost in Petrotrin was in the refining business. So the money was being made here, being lost here. And then to continue that model, the Ministry of Finance over there had to put money into the system too. We've taken the refinery out. So that money-losing part of the business has been taken out. So Peparia is making some money. Our fuel service is going on undisturbed. We have gasoline, we have diesel undisturbed. We're selling to the region. And of course, Heritage is looking for oil, finding oil, selling oil at a profit. So that's the improved situation. Right?
But what about exploration and production, though? Because those were two areas that were considered that needed significant improvement to get the amount of oil that needed to be refined in the first place.
That's what Heritage is doing.
But has there been any improvement in exploration and production of oil?
Improvement in production, as the production has gone up slightly, but the improvement has come in the cost, in the lifting costs. The cost to lift a barrel of oil has gone down considerably through Heritage operation, whereas before, it was much more expensive, and that is good because the price of oil in the market now is lower. But Heritage lifting costs has been lowered so that even with the low international market price, Heritage could make a profit because its lifting cost has been reduced. If its lifting cost was still where it was, the current international market price could not have supported that lifting cost, and it would have been losing money in the Heritage operation. So it is a good thing and very timely thing that we had done to put Heritage in place, because the international market price for oil is now consistently lower than it was before. When the price was $100 and it cost you $43 to lift a barrel of oil, there's a big profit margin there. But now, the margin now, the international market now is $39, $40. I think it's gone up a little bit now, $44. Our lifting cost now is about $30, $29, $30. So you still have now a profit between. But had we not done that, we would have been lifting at $43 and the market paying $40. Understand? So it was a good thing and a very timely thing that we had reduced the lifting cost by creating Heritage.
Did the sanctions on Venezuela and the Rio Treaty cause the Dragon gas deal to be cancelled with Venezuela?
No. The Dragon deal with Venezuela was stymied by the United States unilaterally placing U.S. sanctions on Venezuela, preventing Venezuela from doing business with Trinidad and Tobago. So between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, everything is in place for the Dragon to have gone on. Even the operator, Shell was the operator, and we would have gone, and the intention was that we could have been producing that gas. But in any case, because of how the world market has changed, that in itself is not a big problem for us, because the international gas market is oversupplied. The price has gone down. And we are now having a situation where even where gas is available, some people are not producing at Point Lisas because the market for the finished product has contracted because of the international global situation with the pandemic. But it's there. We have the agreement in place. We have an operator. We have a gas price. We have a term sheet agreed upon. And then the US and Venezuela get into whatever they're into. And the US decided to stymie Venezuela because it prevented the Venezuelan government from doing business with people who normally would do business with them.
Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, and he says the union needs to move away from the rah-rah and the noise and concentrate on the corporate business, but the government intends to get a good contract between Patriotic Energies and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the people. We take a break and we'll be back with you.
Feed the fun with Frito-Lay snacks and win a grand prize of $30,000 or be one of 30 lucky winners to win $1,000 cash each. Just purchase Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, or Tostitos for your chance to win. For more details, check out the Frito-Lay TT Facebook page.
Distributed by AMCO, a subsidiary of Ansa Macau.
Homeland Marketing for your wrought iron designs. Gates, zinc hollow section, primer, Makita tools, wheels, tracks and guides. Number 44 Montrose Main Road, Chaguanas. 3 buildings after the Chaguanas Medical Center heading east. Homeland Marketing, beautifying homes.
Recession have you down? Don't lose hope. Head on down to Tire Clinic for the recession deals. Big savings with a road hazard warranty on Dunlop, Sumitomo, and Falcon tires. Available at Tire Clinic, Couva, Chaguanas, and Pleasant Spark. Tire Clinic, a tire for every need.
Welcome back to the program. So in his victory speech Monday night, the Prime Minister hinted at this being his last term in government. So I am so curious, and I'm sure all of you are, to find out who will he consider to be his successor. Dr. Rowley, what can you tell us?
I've been in this for a long time. I've been in public life and its strictures, and when I look at it, I've been in this for a long time, and I don't. There are some things that I really want to do, and that is like looming. And
looming, you said?
Yeah. You know, I've just, as a matter of fact, you know, I had even considered not running on this occasion, but it didn't really, I thought I had the responsibility to the organization that I led and the people that I've encouraged in to take them through this period. And thankfully we succeeded in getting another term.
Did you share that particular thought with the people in your camp that you considered not running?
No, because they would misunderstand it.
What was the reason though behind it?
The reason was that, you know what 40 years is?
Yeah, my age, as long as I've been alive.
Okay, well, you can imagine. And, you know, there comes a time when you begin to look over the horizon, and I guess I'm at that stage. What's over the horizon there?
Who do you see to be your successor in the party?
I wouldn't want to answer that question now, because it's not a question from this. It's not a monarchy where you pick your successor.
I know, but you're going to be training somebody to underwrite you. So who are you looking at?
Well, it's not for me to underwrite. What I have to do is to ensure that in working with people, managing people, producing people, because I do have, and I've had, the responsibility and the influence in getting some people involved and so on. My role really is to make sure that those people are developed to a point where when there's time for selection of somebody to replace me, either in the short or the medium term, that the party and the country has people who can say, I fit the bill. And then they
no, based on the constitution of the People's National Movement, does it have to be a deputy political leader?
One man, one vote.
So people vote. Does it have to be?
That was one of my proudest successes in the PNM, where I was able to encourage the party to move from the delegate system, which was controlled by the incumbents. I was an incumbent. But given what I've observed, what I experienced, what the party had experienced, we very smoothly moved from the delegate system to one man, one vote. You would have seen what happened in Tobago in the THA elections. There was a leader in place. The party members came in a one man, one vote. Very smoothly, there was a change of leadership and a transitional opportunity. So the party...
I don't think it was smoothly, but
might be smooth for you and your friends who were trying to create, but in the PNM it was a very smooth transition. We had a one-man, one-vote election. We had candidates. We had a contest. We had nobody got 50 plus 1. We had a runoff. In the runoff, 2 persons went and 1 person won. And of course, there was a transition period. There's a changeover. Today we have a new chief secretary and a new leader of the PNM. Not chief secretary, well, new chief secretary and a new leader of the PNM.
So can you say categorically that you won't be running for the 2025 constitutionally due elections?
Barring, I don't think that I should, at this stage, be taking that decision. But I've taken the decision that I should be transitioning and ensuring that there's succession planning in the PNM. There's an election during the PNM sometime soon for the leadership.
Will you be contesting that?
I have not taken that decision on that yet, but as I said, the PNM is well organized to deal with these situations.
So, Doc, you're not giving me any information, Dr.
Well, it's
Rowley.
because I've given you enough. You want more?
Yes.
Okay. With the inflection of time, you would see, we are not a pick-up side, you know. The PNM is an institution, and I'm a responsible leader of the PNM, and I will do everything that I can to ensure that the PNM's transition is smooth and that the membership is served by what we do, and the country is served by what the PNM does. But I could tell you, we have all the procedures and processes in place for whatever transition that might be required. And what I'm talking about is, at my age, my desire for what I've done, the party's involvement in serving the country, the pool of people who are there in public life, who will be available to the country. All of these things come together at this point in time to have determined that this is a period of transition, and maybe people like you could start looking to see, well, which of these people will replace. That's not for me to know, but I know that the party is in the position to deal with that.
If or when you become, you're sworn in as a prime minister in the new term, what are the plans you have? If or when? I don't know what's going to happen as a result of the constitutional motion that is in place right now, which is a recount. And as a result of that, I don't even know if it's going to go to the courts. I don't know what's going to happen. So my question is, if or when you're sworn in as the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in its new term, what are the plans you have for the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, those plans are embodied in our manifesto document and the statements we've made, because we've made a number of commitments, and they're wide-ranging, and it has to do with, first and foremost, making changes to improve the governance of the country, mainly on our revenue side. Also, on our developmental side, we'll have an aggressive development program and our development of our human capital, because the population, when all is said and done, we exist so that people can be better off. As Bazio Pandey would say, governments exist to make people happy. And if you have the wherewithal to make them happy, or to eliminate the unhappiness that they're experiencing, then the government is doing what it's supposed to do. So we are talking about those 3 areas. But the whole question of stabilizing our revenue and growing our revenue, and that is done through growth in the economy and creating opportunities. Because I keep coming back to that word, opportunity. We'll aim to do things to create opportunity.
That's it?
That's it. What else do you think is going to be?
No, I'm
so
just asking.
If you hear that the government is doing anything, whatever the government is doing, whether it is building a road, opening a school, building a youth camp, it all comes under this whole rubric of opportunity. Question you might ask is, opportunity for whom? Because different people want different opportunities or have different opportunities. We want to expand that, sustain it, grow it. Where you really get into trouble is when there is no opportunity for people to rise from where they are in dissatisfaction to where they would want to be, especially if they're not getting the basic service that they should get. So this government of Trinidad and Tobago is a government, especially in this era, creating opportunity. If I go back to my own development when I was a child, what was required for me, and which my brothers didn't get, was opportunity. I got opportunity. I got to high school. I got opportunity. I was supported by the state in becoming trained. I got an opportunity to get a job. I got opportunity to live in a decent area, and so on. It's all about opportunity.
The Sandals project crashed and burnt very early in the game. What are the plans for accommodation in Tobago?
Well, I don't know why the Sandals project has gone somewhere where it is needed. We didn't think we needed it here. And, you know, so we moved to something else. Tobago, its offering is an economy that could sustain visitors, whether they're local or foreign. Right now, there's no foreign visitors in Tobago of any consequence, but a lot of local people are in Tobago, and the business is going on. And Tobago business and education and tourism, in light industry, and just a place that they can sustain themselves by marketing what Tobago really is, a beautiful place that can be shared.
The borders are still closed, though, and people are anxious to find out when the borders will be reopened.
The borders will be open when the level of risk that an open border poses to the people of Trinidad and Tobago has been reduced to a level where we can take that risk. Basically what the government is doing, and especially me as Prime Minister, the Office of the Prime Minister, is determining how much risk we are prepared to expose the population to, because that is what it is. I today can't tell you when it will be open, but it will remain closed while an open border poses a high risk.
But the reality, Dr. Rowley, is that we have to learn to live during the time of the pandemic. We've had an election during the pandemic. The SEA students are going out to do their exams in 10 days, well, maybe about 8 days now. So why not the borders? I mean, the risk is there.
Well, none of what you mentioned there does not bring risk to us. That's managing risk that is here. We are living with the virus. Look, we'll be having CPL here in 10 days' time or thereabouts. So there'll be international cricket in Trinidad and Tobago, marketed to the world. But the border, when you open the border, especially since the bulk of the traffic into this country comes from the United States, right? If you see what is going on in the United States, you will know that if the border is open and come back to a situation where you have scheduled flights that you could come at will, it's only a matter of days before we get overrun by what is overrunning the United States right now. The U.S., especially right now, Florida, which is the nearest point in the U.S. to us, is the area with probably the greatest amount of COVID problems in the world. The United States is the country with the most COVID problem in the world.
Yet the CDC put out an advisory advising people in the United States not to come to Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean destinations.
That is right. I mean, we don't have any control over that. I mean,
well, how do you feel about it? The fact that the country with the most amount of COVID-19 cases cited the fact that there are cases in the Caribbean and that they're spiking and people from the U.S. should not come to the Caribbean.
Well, they might be telling them don't go there and cause problems. You ever thought of that? That might have been the basis, that might have been the reason for that advisory. You know.
I felt like they wanted to safeguard their people. Don't go and infect the people country. I felt like they wanted to safeguard the people.
Well, you see the glass neither half full or half empty. You saw it as though they were telling them that's a dangerous place, don't go there. I mean, logic tells me, good thing they're telling them don't go there because you all might go down there and cause problems.
Well, I'm happy you look at it with the glass.
What else could it possibly have been? Huh?
I mean, it's the CDC and it's the U.S. under President Trump. Anything is possible.
But you look at what's happening there. What else could you think? That advisory had to be, don't go there and interfere in people's business.
Let us talk about this one issue in Trinidad and Tobago that people keep talking about, which is the wearing of masks, and why the government is not making it legislation for people to wear masks. What exactly is the difficulty with doing that?
it's the logistics of the law enforcement. If you make a law like that, you have to enforce it, and the logistics of enforcing it makes you probably would be no better off, because you have to now get involved. Policemen will come to involve you putting a mask over your nose, and if you don't, there's a consequence. What is a fine, a court case? What is it? Right?
Yeah, but I mean, it could be a fine. Why not?
And then you have to have an administration of how many fines. But we don't think that will improve the use of the mask, because the minute the policeman is not there, right, what happens? Off comes the mask. But on the other hand, if you are made to know that this mask is on your face for your protection and the protection of those around you, then whether the policeman is there or not.
I find it's a weak explanation, because even when the policeman isn't there, people speed. When the policeman isn't there, people have a gun. People pull a trigger. So what's the difference with the mask?
Well, we don't think that will make the mask be... Look at what has happened. I think we've agreed that the whole question of congregation is what is the danger. And we try not to congregate. And then you see people organizing congregations. So you have to now try to have law enforcement. I have not seen anybody being fined or taken to court for organizing a congregation of people. You understand? You get the point I'm making? Mm-hmm. So making masks legally enforceable does not ensure that, does not guarantee that enforcement effectively will change, would be there to change this.
Yeah, but no law, when enforced, guarantees that people will do the right thing. But you put the law because you're trying to mitigate against a lot of people doing what is right when it's necessary.
But there are other ways of doing that. I mean, you know, this particular issue is better dealt with by getting a personal buy-in. Right?
But even you yourself raised concerns about people not wearing their masks.
But
people's social gathering.
A fair amount of people are wearing masks. We look to see what is happening in the population. Two things are happening which have allowed us not to go, you know, too far in creating logistical problems like that. We're not seeing a large amount of people reporting to doctors saying that they're sick, right, with coronavirus problems. And we're not seeing people coming to the hospitals because they need hospitalization. That tells us that there's a threshold somewhere there which we can feel good about. But we also have to be concerned that we're not creating the environment that could allow those two things to suddenly...
Considering that we're getting clusters of cases now, is it something the government is willing to consider to legislate people to wear a mask? Is it any consideration of the government?
If it comes to that, if it comes to that, we have said up front, we will do what has to be done to protect the citizenry.
And you don't think that these clusters of cases is enough to say, okay, let us go this route?
Not just yet, right? Not just yet. Because even though we're picking up these clusters, so far the data is that, and the increased numbers are around from particular sources, like you don't have it and you were in contact with ABCD, so we go and check ABCD and discover that A and B got it. That's where we're at right now.
But we still have a lot of cases under epidemiological investigation as well.
Yes, but I'm saying, but you balance that by saying that we're not seeing a lot of people running to their GP saying, I'm sick with the virus, or they didn't go to the doctor, but they get sick enough and they go to the hospital.
But isn't the government supposed to be proactive as compared to reactive?
And all of that, well, that's saying we are monitoring that on a daily basis, hourly basis. And when we think that we are at the stage where we're required to make adjustments, we make the adjustments.
All right, Dr. Keith Rowley here with me this morning. You can call 624-8721, 627-8658 to speak with the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Dr. Rowley, I think we've covered a lot of bases. I am hoping to hear something more concrete about what you have planned for the youth because they're disenfranchised.
So you just stop telling them that they're disenfranchised. They're not disenfranchised. I mean, their participation and the level of participation is not what one would like to see. But I tell you one thing, this victory that the PNM has just enjoyed was largely as a result of the youth participation in the electoral process. A lot of people make statements which are anecdotal. Right? I went to our campaign office.
Sorry, Dr. Rowley, you want to just hold that thought? We do have a call on the line. Caller, good morning to you.
Morning, Natalie. Morning, Dr. Rowley.
Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Rowley, I have a quick question for you. Incidentally, we share the same first name and we are the same age. I have known that during my lifetime, water, electricity, and roads were a big feature on the election campaign phase. We have seen where Petrotrin has been successfully restructured. I am looking at, is there a plan in the works? Because water, the delivery of water seems to be a problem that we cannot seem to address properly. And is it in the works to restructure WASA at some stage? And I'm not hearing anything about the Beetham wastewater project, that whether it will be restarted or what's happening there. But is there any train in motion where you would be considering the total restructuring of WASA?
Well, where there's a problem, the government has a responsibility to address that problem. And there are problems in WASA, structural problems, problems of the management, problems of efficiency in providing the service, the role of contracting in the organizations against in-house. So there are a number of things. And the answer, the same way we looked at the Petrotrin problem and came up with solutions, we will have to look at WASA.
Caller, good morning to you.
Good morning, Natalie.
Yes.
Natalie, you are a very good journalist. And Dr. Rowley, good morning.
Good morning.
But you are too honest to be a good politician. And I mean that in the best way possible.
I wonder what's coming next.
But what I want to ask Dr. Rowley, please, I also want to hear more specific things about and job creation and development of youth in this country. But I am a teacher in the secondary school system, and what I want to ask Dr. Rowley, I am not asking you what plans you have in place. I am asking you, please, we need a drastic. I am asked every year to turn out students who may not necessarily be in the best position to really take advantage of the education system for various reasons. I want to ask for a drastic overhaul of the education system in this country. It is very needed. It is really needed at this point in time. But
All right, thank you, caller. Dr. Rowley.
A drastic overhaul of the education system. Well, he's probably asking for a riot. No, the education system has been central in this country ever since the PNM came into being. And it has always been in the center of what we do. It has been the largest claimant on budgetary allocations for years. There are only very few instances where anything else. But there is need for a review of what we're doing. Because we may be, I'm not here, we may be spending more and more on the education system and getting less and less education.
So then how do you plan to address that? Because the government did promise the tailor-made programs to match its national development plan.
Well, we make, this caller just asked for a drastic overhaul. I don't know that the overhaul could be drastic to break the mold to remake it. But you need some changes, but changes that would bring about, like for example, we spoke about changes in the curriculum. What goes on in the school? What are citizens taught? What kind of citizens are produced by the system that we're funding? Those are the kinds of questions we have to answer. But they're not simple things, yeah? Because the minute you talk about change, the biggest problem that you have is the resistance to change. Because as bad as it is now, as it's being described, it works for some people. And those people are going to defend it, and therefore, in our open democratic system, you have to work with that resistance while trying to make change. And that usually is the biggest problem.
We have not been hearing from the Minister of Education. We've tried, people have been complaining right across the board, but the government is still in place, and Anthony Garcia is still the Minister of Education. What's happening there? We have to be waiting on the press conferences to hear what's happening in education.
There will be a new education minister, and I trust that you will probably hear from him more than this one. I don't know, but there will be a new Minister of Education.
Caller, good morning to you.
So that problem you...
Yes, ma'am. Morning.
Yes.
Morning the Honorable Speaker Rowley.
Good morning.
Congrats on your re-election. So,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Rowley, just one question and one suggestion. My question is, with respect to the crime that is going on in the country, right? We know that you have spoken about the reactive part. So the police, you have given the police all the elements that they need to react to crime. But what is the government's intention with respect to curbing the crime?
Well,
and the suggestion is, I hope that in Budgetary speech, we don't hear anything about the gas price raising. That's it.
What do you want?
Hear something about gas price? I'm not sure what he said there.
I didn't get that. But I did say that in responding to the chronic crime problem, there were different prongs of approach, of which policing was one. I talked about the social support system, and the education system, and the creation of opportunities for people to have different options in life than choosing an option of crime. And of course, the whole question of the availability of tools to commit crime. So those are all the things. There's no one switch that you use to switch off crime. There are series, there's a whole panel of things, and all have to be done together to get the kind of success. And once you're moving in the right direction, then that's what we aim to do, and I think we're doing that.
Caller, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Legore. Good morning, Dr. Rowley.
Good morning.
The agricultural sector has been the bastard child of successive government. My, not question, but my request to you is if you can do a little more or increase what has to be done in the agricultural sector, because apparently the land is now the new oil field. And if we can produce enough food that we can start to export, then we can kind of shift away from that dependency on the oil. Example, cocoa. A barrel of cocoa is way much more money than a barrel of oil. So this is something that we need to look at going forward.
Thank you, caller.
Yeah, but it's not an either-or situation. It's all hands on deck. And the comparison with a barrel of oil and a barrel of cocoa, but how many barrels of cocoa you can produce? As compared to the ability to produce more barrels of oil. And there was a time the maximum amount of cocoa we produced in this country was far less than the barrels of oil. And then, of course, the absence of those to produce the barrels of cocoa, that's the problem we've been having. The land on which the cocoa plant will grow, the lands are still there. So our approach in this government is to try and get more farmers into farming. Not farmers who are sent there just because the government say go. People who want to farm, to support them in farming. That's the approach this government is taking, right? Because farming is not like other things where you get on the payroll and you get paid. Farming, you have to be there and want to do it. Because, for example, if you're raising animals, you can't have days where you don't want to go on the farm.
Let's take a final call. Caller, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Natalee. Good morning, Dr. Rowley.
Good morning.
My question is, Dr. Rowley, in light of the recent spike in COVID cases, is there any plan by the government at this point in time, if the cases continue to rise, to roll back some of our parts of the economy in terms of restrictions, in terms of time for restaurants, bars, any kind of activities, especially in light of the fact that the public service has already gone on 50% rotation or rotating according to surname. Is there any plan in the future based on how COVID is looking at this point in time? I know you have said that we must live with COVID, but is there any plan to roll back the times where...
Thank you, caller.
Everything in managing this, the virus threat, everything is on the table. There's nothing that is off the table. The closure of the border is on the table, the rolling back of the population on the outside, but we make those decisions based on proper scientific advice as to what the threat is and how the threat could either be managed or exploded. And then it's a risk management thing. For example, we had put the children back out of school.
But can we afford
we had put the children back out of school,
close down the economy
right?
again?
If that is what is required, if it gets to a situation where the virus somehow is at a level in the country where we are having to make that decision, then how could we not make that decision?
Dr.
But let us hope that we don't get there again. Look at what happened in the Bahamas. The Bahamas went through a phase, they reopened the country, they started back some semblance of normalcy, and when the level of virus in the country was such, they just had to close the country down again.
Dr.
So
Rowley,
we're saying we hope
wrap.
it doesn't get there.
We have to wrap, so your closing comments?
Well, these are different times, they're difficult times, and the new administration is coming into office. I couldn't tell you when, but that gives us impetus to go forward and to continue to be responsible in Trinidad, to be able to provide the country with the best chance of overcoming these challenges.
I want to thank you so much for being with us here on the Morning Brew this morning. Your presence was definitely appreciated, and for explaining to the population some of the plans that you have for the youth, for the country, and how to treat with the pandemic. So we thank you on behalf of myself and the entire production team.
Well, I must thank you for having me, and I hope that I would have been of some benefit this morning. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. And that's how we close the Morning Brew this morning. Thank you all so much for participating and tuning in.